We're going back to 1991 once again to talk about the other grunge album that came out that year, Pearl Jam's most excellent debut album, 10. Stay with us.
Get ready for the 3324 podcast, where lifelong friends Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber share their love of all things music and movies. Dean has directed short films and is a music trivia buff. And Eric, trained in audio engineering, brings his extensive knowledge of music and film to the conversation as they discuss, debate, and celebrate their favorite albums, films, and much more.
Welcome, friends, to the 3324 podcast. First episode of 2023, Eric.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exciting. Very exciting. Yeah.
Yes.
Close.
As we enter the third calendar year of our podcast, although the anniversary is still a month and a half away, 2 months away.
Yeah, but that's crazy though.
But we're coming up on it pretty quick. If you're watching us on YouTube right now, do me a favor, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Also, like the video, leave a comment too if you want to tell us what your favorite Pearl Jam album is or what songs you like off of this album 10. Let us know. By all means, what as the young ones say, smash that subscribe button. Go ahead and smash it and leave us a like if you would. So we've got some guests here today
In the house.
But I think what we're going to do, since it's the first episode of the new year, we're not even going to talk to them. We're going to make like we're going to have them on the show, but they're going to sit and wait for us to say something, and we'll never ever include them in the conversation. How does that sound?
Fair enough.
We'll just talk about.
No, you do not talk, sir. I was speaking to Eric.
He's coming up with some pretty radical ideas in this. Our third. They say the third year is the charm, though, isn't it?
Yeah, we're closing in on year number 2, and that my friends was Mr. Gerry Sullivan making his triumphant return. We haven't had you on in a while, Gerry. How are you?
Yeah,
I can speak.
You
can speak.
You have been spoken to, so you may release the words.
Very happy to be here. Welcome.
I get that.
Thank you. Well, I welcome as well.
Yeah.
Wait, you're welcoming us to our show?
Well, I welcome you to my little corner that I live in.
And it is a hovel.
Yes.
That you look like Andy Dufresne after he played the opera record. Another month.
Just waiting.
Another month.
Solitary.
I didn't know what those Italian people were saying, but it sounded good.
Hey, Gerry, you got to have hope, Gerry.
Yes.
You'll get out of there one day. Also joining us for her first episode of the new year, Ms. Christy Cuomo.
Owner of the hovel that Gerry's.
Yeah.
There you go. I thought you'd say owner of a lonely heart. I thought we were going with yes here.
Oh, owner of the prison?
You're basically the warden.
She's the warden.
Gerry's my Andy. Hello.
Your ass belongs to me. We're fresh off our Shawshank episode,
Yes.
so we kind of all this stuff is kind of
Yes.
Gerry's doing my.
There's always a little bleed over from the previous episode. I've been noticing, Eric, that we'll kind of we'll do something, and then the last episode there's like echoes of that one that will kind of bleed into the
fresh in your head, right? I mean, come on. Yeah, it was a good one too.
Yeah, it was fun.
It was fun. Yeah,
a lot of
conversation.
A lot of fun. So what we're doing today is, we're going back to 1991, and we're going to be talking about Pearl Jam's debut album 10. A lot of stuff going on in 91. One of our earliest episodes was about Nirvana. And Nevermind, and that's kind of the cornerstone of grunge or whatever. I think there's a conference. I think Nirvana can't help but be a part of this conversation, and I'm looking forward to that. And some of the other, we'll talk about the other. There's basically 2 or 3 other grunge bands that kind of make the nucleus up, make up the nucleus of the movement in 91 and 92. So we'll probably incorporate them as well. But let's get to the stats like we always do. So this was released in August of 1991, produced by Rick Parashar and Pearl Jam. Rick Parashar, if you go look him up on Wikipedia, he has produced a lot of the grunge bands. He produced Alice in Chains, and I think he worked with Soundgarden, and Temple of the Dog, I believe, as well. So he was kind of a shoo-in for Pearl Jam to want to work with him because he was experienced and he was kind of worked in that genre already, even though it was still an emerging genre. There were 4 singles released from this album. Only one made the Billboard charts. There was, there's all these other charts, the alternative, modern chart, this, that, and the other thing. But the 4 singles, first single was Alive, did not chart on the Billboard, Hot 100. Even Flow, did not chart either. Jeremy hit number 79. And that's the closest they would come. And then Oceans would be the final single, which, again, not charting on the popular Hot 100 charts. Reached number 2 on Billboard album charts. So, but despite that, despite not really having something that was radio friendly, and we'll even talk about how Pearl Jam was not MTV friendly by their own choice, that this hit number 2, and it went 13 times platinum, over 13 million copies sold. This is a banger.
Mm-hmm.
This is a monster. It is a monster album for them. This is Pearl Jam, still their best selling album of all time. So before we get into the round robin of where we first encountered this, let's just go through the 1991 lineup of Pearl Jam at the time. And it was Ed Vedder on vocals, Stone Gossard on guitar, Mike McCready on guitar, Jeff Ament on bass, and then Dave Cruzen was on drums. And the first 4 gentlemen that I ran down are the core band. Like, that's never changed. They did have a little Spinal Tap thing going on where they couldn't really, they went through a couple of drummers, and then they finally settled in with Matt Cameron for, he's been with them for decades now. But there was, in the beginning, after, Dave Cruzen had some alcohol issues, and he left, and they kind of were getting some fill-ins, and then finally Matt Cameron. So let's start with Gerry. Wake up, Gerry. You all right?
I'm here.
You're there? Okay, good. So
I'm waiting.
I know in solitary there's not many slivers of light, so I just wanted to make sure you're okay.
I'm good.
Good. So
colors, it's all good.
So what was in 1991? Was this something that was on your radar, or was this something that you came to later in life?
The 1991 was my senior year of high school, start of, and then I graduated in 92. And amazingly, those that know me, I was a very happy-go-lucky young man. Now I'm very curmudgeonly, but something
angry and bitter.
Yes,
aren't we all?
Yeah, but something like, I love this album. This is one of the few albums I can listen to start to finish in order that they put it out and love it. But I guess it just came along. We were discussing a little earlier, was more into heavy metal and stuff before. The grunge. I got into Nirvana. Oddly, I never, even though I know you put them in grunge, I never saw them. I never saw Pearl Jam as grunge. Yeah. They looked grunge.
Yeah, well, we're definitely going to talk about that also.
Yeah, their sound and what they kind of put through their music always felt different. But at that point, being 17, 18, this was like, I couldn't get enough of this album. Yeah. I would just listen to it constantly, and it's still one I can put on start to finish in the order that they put it out in, and love it to death.
Yeah, cool. So, Christy, 1991.
Like Gerry, I was actually 2 years behind Gerry, so I was, I guess.
So you were just happy and not go lucky?
Yep.
Yeah.
Haven't found the lucky part yet.
No, I think at the age I was when this came out, and I did like the album right away. I agree with Gerry. It fell into grunge, but it was more rock, but not like hard. Like, it wasn't like heavy metal. It was like this in between world of
alternative
grunge
rock.
I guess alternative rock, but
air quotes.
Yes.
But it was just one of these albums that came out, and we were talking, Gerry and I were talking about this before, where
was there a whole other show that happened before we came on?
Yeah, Gerry stayed awake.
It sounds like you and Gerry were doing a lot of talking about this before we started, and Eric and I were not privy to any of the we didn't know there was if there was a pre-show. Did we record this or?
Well, no, Gerry had
just
visiting
in case
hours.
We weren't allowed to speak. We were already getting ready.
Jerry had visiting hours in his prison, so I came and
the kid passed C+ average. Slipping in the food, the slop with the maggots in it. There you go. Anyway,
but we digress.
That's right.
When this music came out, was CDs even popular? I probably had the cassette.
CDs were. CDs were around.
Yeah, but I don't think they were popular, so it might have been the cassette I had first. Where you didn't mind. The point is, you didn't mind listening to this album from, like Gerry said, beginning to end. Like, there's not a bad song on it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was perfect age, perfect mood. I was in the angst. I wasn't happy go lucky. I mean, I was happy, but
you were
Go
happy
lucky,
to be
go lucky.
angry.
Go lucky is when you become a senior. Then you're go lucky.
Yeah, then I'm go lucky. So
You were happy to be angry, right, Christy?
well, I wouldn't say angry, but there's a I fancied myself, and I still do. Like I wrote poetry. I was a writer. So. And these are, and I'm sure we'll get into it. But Eddie Vedder's
Killing small animals.
I was I was
Angst
dommering.
breeds creativity. There it is.
And murder.
It's true, though, isn't it? Yeah.
Doing the Dahmer. I was.
There you go.
No, but if
Jeremy was written after her.
The lyrics, and we talked about this on the top 5. Like Kelly might have mentioned it on Jewel. I would open up and read the lyrics before I'd even listen to the album.
Yeah.
And when you read these lyrics, what you can read, because usually it's handwritten from Eddie Vedder, I was blown away by the lyrics even before I listened to the music. So.
Yeah, and in the case of Mr. Vedder, reading the lyrics is required. Can be difficult to understand, but that's part of his allure. Is like his vocal styling. So Eric, what about you? From the jump?
Because I heard whatever it was, Jeremy on the radio, Even Flow. But what struck me about the album, aside from those songs, because I think I had it on cassette as well, and I think it's the only Pearl Jam album I ever owned. But I actually bought it on CD eventually after my tape worn out. But what struck me about this album was how classic it felt, and how like you say, it wasn't really grunge. It wasn't Nirvana. It was like the anti-Nirvana. It was different. I love the grooves that they have on this record. The music struck me first before any lyric. Especially the bass, that killer bass, and it reminded me of Led Zeppelin. There's a lot of Zeppelin. It's very Zeppelin-esque, and of course, finding out that Eddie Vedder, of course, is a big fan of the Who, so that's all I needed to hear.
There you go.
And a big fan of Talking Heads, and a lot of my favorite bands as well. So I was like, okay, that's cool, So, but yeah, I had it, and yeah, I did. This was probably one of the only, like I we talked about how a lot of this kind of stuff just kind of passed me by because I was looking to other things, but this was one of those albums that I actually owned, and Stone Temple Pilots as well.
Core, which came out in 92, came out right on the heels of this.
That's right.
I had this from the jump too, on cassette as well. The CDs were out, but CDs were still expensive. Like CDs were like $20 still at the time, and you can get a cassette like on sale for like $7.99.
And so CDs came in those long things.
Came in the long box. Yeah. What's called the long box. And so there was still that time of, okay, do I want to spend $20 on something I don't know, or I'll get the Beatles stuff when it comes out because I know I want that. But you would kind of experiment with cassettes because it was still cheap enough. And I absolutely had the cassette of this. I had Versus when it came out as well. Yeah, it just seemed to be one of those albums, and I think we'll talk about it since each one of you has brought it up, about the grunge thing, right? Like same thing. I heard Even Flow and I was enamored with the song, and enamored with the way that Eddie kind of, again, it's somewhat hard to understand, but that's part. Then it becomes musical also, right? You're saying about the instrumentation and everything. If you're having a hard time without reading the lyrics, picking up on what he's saying, then you have to get the vibe of what he's trying to say, right? And the emotion of what he's trying to say without necessarily always understanding everything.
Absolutely.
Right?
It's most definitely, his the way he phrases the words and
the way he phrases, the way
it's all part of the rhythm, all part of the rhythm of the song. Yeah.
And he gets it across without you not necessarily knowing exactly everything that he's saying. So it was a very interesting kind of, introduction to a different way, a different type of music than, we have this hard rock, there's, listening to the Cult, but that's pretty clear. You can kind of understand what's going on. Yeah. This was something a little bit different. Now, 91, Nirvana comes out with Nevermind. It came out earlier in the year. It came out in January of 91. This comes out in August of 91. They're both from Seattle. You know, you've got another band called Soundgarden from the Seattle area also. Pearl Jam came out of the ashes of a group called Mother Love Bone, which was, again, from the Seattle area. That lead singer, Andy Wood, had OD'd on heroin, and that's going to be a through line for this episode as well. But Nirvana is something like, yeah, when I was listening to, I must have listened to this album like 5 or 6 times, you know, getting ready for this, because I haven't listened to it in a while. And I'm thinking a lot about Nirvana. I'm like, these guys, you know, Gerry's right. Like, how is this being lumped in with that, you know, with Nirvana? Is it just because they're from Seattle
and they dress the same?
And they dress the same, right?
Yeah, the look.
You're right. It was the cargos, it was the flannels, it was the look. You know,
yeah.
The cargo shorts was the look, with the boots, with the work boots. You know, Nirvana wore the flannels too, the sweaters, that whole.
But that was just it was just a style of
how
the
people
time.
dressed in Seattle.
It's how people dressed.
But I mean, that's how you lump them in.
Yeah, but didn't Kurt Cobain himself, like he wasn't so welcoming in the beginning to Pearl Jam?
No, he was
lumped in with them because
he did not like Pearl Jam at all.
Actually. Yeah, he didn't recognize them as his peers or his contemporaries. No. And
Soundgarden, the same thing though. They dressed the same way. Soundgarden wore the flannels, you know, tied around. You know, Chris Cornell tied around his waist. You know, like, so this was a very easy thing to kind of, okay, you're from Seattle, you dress a certain way. This is now a musical groundswell. You know, and so with Nirvana, like quote unquote, leading the charge,
yeah,
we need to call this something just because of Nirvana's rawness, right? Which again, this album is raw in a different way. Nirvana is raw in a more screeching way, in like a more primal scream way. This is more raw in just, and I think that the lyrical content on this, I think, is easier to kind of grab hold of, whereas Nirvana is a little more esoteric, and, you know, you're in the mind of Kurt Cobain. You know, being in the mind of Eddie Vedder it seems like it's something that everybody can kind of relate to a little bit more, his experiences.
I would almost disagree with you and say Pearl Jam, even in the way Eddie Vedder sings, is more primal. Like when you were talking about him earlier, when you don't understand what he's saying, like, and the way he sings, he pulls the mic in, and it almost like he pulls his voice back, and it's like a growl that comes out of him with the words. So I would almost say that Pearl Jam is more primal, and I think both of them have lyrics that are, you have to be willing to kind of dive into them. Neither one have lyrics that are really clean cut, and it's not like a country album here.
But it seemed like Pearl Jam, the lyric, like, to me, Nirvana, as much as I love them, a lot of their things seem very nonsensical, at least from what I could see. Pearl Jam
wants a cracker.
There you go.
Pearl Jam, you could kind of tell he's trying to convey an emotion or a story, at least a little. You'd have to delve in to see. I mean, it's much easier now because you can just look everything up. But they felt like, even though the sound, I know what you're saying with the primal, like, feel, but the emotions from the lyrics were just different to me for Pearl Jam. Like,
and that's
Nirvana
what I mean.
Was like,
Well, from what I gather too, it's like Eddie Vedder would write about anything. There's that story where he was locked out of the studio and in the rain, and he wrote Oceans, the lyrics to Oceans, while he was, you know, locked out of he was banging on the door, and they were jamming. They couldn't hear him, so he had to wait till they were done, so that they could let him in, because he was, you know, helping somebody out or whatever. But he jotted down the lyrics to Oceans, where I think Kurt Cobain was a little bit wearing stuff so much. It was much more personal and close to the chest, and it was very sort of like almost therapy for himself, like, because he was so, you know, troubled, you know.
I think there's something to be said though for how, you know, maybe because the story also goes is that after the disintegration of Mother Love Bone, you know, Stone Gossard and Jeff Ament were kind of, you know, they're trying to get something together again. They wanted to get another band going, so they gave a demo tape of just instrumental stuff out, right? And the drummer for the Red Hot Chili Peppers at the time was friends with this guy Ed Vedder down in San Francisco or San Diego surfing. The guy's doing, he had done he'd been in a couple of bands, but nothing big. But he gave him this stuff, gave him the cassette. Eddie goes surfing, comes back and writes the lyrics to Alive.
Yeah.
Kind of goes out and surfs and kind of just whatever contemplates and comes back and then just and jotted down these, the 3 songs that they gave him. They sent it back up and they're like, yeah, okay, yeah, we're going to fly you up here.
But
he was able to get in touch with something somehow in a very intuitive and I don't know if he thinks it's easier, but it seems that he's able to access these things and put them into lyrics easier.
That's what he's known. I don't know if it was McCready or Stone Gossard that said he never met anyone who wrote the way Eddie Vedder wrote, and he was astonished by it. Where he would just listen to the music and, like you said, and write the lyrics. And he said since then he's met people that can do it, maybe not quite as well as in his opinion Eddie Vedder. Mm-hmm. But to what Eric was saying earlier, a lot of Vedder's songs are deep rooted in, I don't want to say political, but like they're about drug addiction. They're about being pro-choice. Jeremy it comes from two true happenings. Like so he's writing about things that are deeply affecting him, mm-hmm. and this is how he deals with it. I mean, Alive is about the fucked up story of finding out about his dad and who we thought was his father. I mean, it's just so there is. I think him and Cobain both did it. They just did it very differently.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think what I was trying to get at was the fact that Cobain was very internal with his, things were happening to him, and he would write mm-hmm. almost from an internal point of view. Whereas Vedder was, he was out. Everything is kind of widespread. He's noticing. He's picking his head up and looking at the world and everything around him. And
that I agree with. Yeah,
writing about that, and both are troubling. Sure, you're writing about troubling things, but Vedder had a knack of just seeing something and just, I'm not an Eddie Vedder expert by any means, but in terms of like songwriting and that kind of thing, but that's kind of what I gather from it, because he's very, almost, because he's into surfing and because he's into all these other things. Whereas Cobain would just kind of lock himself in a room and
very isolated.
And that's the way he wanted it,
And unfortunately, look what happened. I mean, unfortunately,
I want to throw 2 more bands into the mix: Alice in Chains, and Stone Temple Pilots. And those four bands are pretty much always kind of grouped together, and then Soundgarden on the periphery, because Soundgarden was always around in Seattle, but then they didn't get popular till really popular till a little bit afterwards. But Alice in Chains, another Seattle band, right, with dark lyrics, and that Lane Staley with the he's got that voice too, that haunting low voice, Man in the Box and that kind of stuff. So you if you're looking at it from that standpoint, well, Lane Staley and Eddie Vedder kind of have a similar vocal styling, and then you throw Scott Weiland in there with his vocal stylings, and they used to say that he was ripping off Eddie Vedder. Mm-hmm. Like they were saying, you're just a poor man's Eddie Vedder. Now all of a sudden you've got grunge, right? Because you've got 4 bands where the aesthetic is similar, from fashion sense to vocal stylings, but Pearl Jam is still decidedly not as dark as Alice in Chains. Dark in a different way. It's I would, on the spectrum, I would put Pearl Jam as moodier than darker, right? Like Pearl Jam talks about moods and emotions. Nirvana and Alice in Chains is about darker themes. Is that a fair assessment, Gerry? Is that kind of hit close to it? And then I would say Pearl Jam and Stone Temple Pilots on one side, and Nirvana and Alice in Chains on another side.
I mean, I'm not as familiar with Alice in Chains mm-hmm. and Stone Temple Pilots, but from what I do know, that's actually how I would see it, because that's how it always kind of came to me. Going back to the other points of Kurt Cobain was struggling much more within himself, which makes it much darker because he was even struggling with, being popular and all that stuff. Whereas you can see it now, Eddie Vedder and Pearl Jam almost became like activists. They were trying to get a message out. They were trying to tell, and you can see it much like you could see, having lasted this long, how they've changed so much because, the one, I think it's the video where we were talking about it in our pre-gaming, Christy, when he's hanging, climbing through the rafters of the concert and stuff.
He used to be a maniac.
I think during Porch,
You would never
do
see
that.
that now.
Yeah.
He's much calmer.
He's older.
Even some of his,
he would shatter like the T-1000.
He's like, is he like 60 years old?
He would even say, like he had said, Alive is now a different song to him because of how his whole journey has gone through. But Kurt Cobain, in Nirvana never got that chance because it was just too dark for him.
Yeah.
And Nirvana had
and just talking about Nirvana, just to close the book on them, on their second album, In Utero, it wasn't a leap. It wasn't leaps and bounds like in Evolution. But if you look at the second Stone Temple Pilots album, Purple, it was they started veering to, like they started cementing, okay, we're more of a rock band, and Pearl Jam started kind of doing the same thing too. Like on their second albums, these, Pearl Jam and Stone Temple Pilots started staking out a territory that was different from what Nirvana was still doing, and Alice in Chains to a lesser degree. So you really start to see those roads really start to fork with the second and subsequent albums.
Well, one thing, because it does fit in, you have to recognize the difference between Pearl Jam, and then we're looking at Nirvana, and we're looking at Stone Temple Pilots and Alice in Chains and Soundgarden, and there's a lot of similarities, but you have to recognize Pearl Jam not only for that they were more rock, alternative rock, whatever we're calling them, than they were grunge. Also, they stayed together as a band, and they're all alive, and they're still a band, and there's something to be said for that in so many regards of the music, and kind of like what you were saying before, I think it was Eric, where maybe the way Vedder got his emotions out in a way to be a cleanse for him, and the band worked to their advantage as opposed to where Kurt Cobain was so it was so internalized that he couldn't be honest.
It didn't seem to help.
It didn't help him. But I mean,
if anything, he had more contempt for the audience.
He did. He hated his fame. He hated being famous.
Well, that's my question to all of you: is do you think it's part of the criteria of a grunge band to be anti-fame? Because Pearl Jam's the same way. They I don't know if they don't want to be rock stars per se. They want to be. They're known as that. Pearl Jam is not cool. Yeah, but it doesn't mean that they're not great.
I don't know if they don't want to be famous. Let me run down something that I have written down, and this will probably close some of this out. Right? We talked about Andy Wood. He was the original lead singer of Mother Love Bone.
Yeah,
OD'd. Shannon Hoon, lead singer of Blind Melon, did not make it out of the 90s. Lane Staley, Alice in Chains, barely made it out of the 90s. Scott Weiland did not. He made it out of the 90s, but passed away due to his addictions. Chris Cornell, another, it seems like all these the grunge artists that we're talking, the groups that we're talking about, all of the lead singers passed away at some point or another, except for Pearl Jam. I'm not saying that Pearl Jam should be lionized for that. But yeah, there might be something to, not that they didn't want to be famous, but weren't able to necessarily handle or be ready or prepared.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they're all the same. I'm not saying all these guys' situations were the same, but you can't overlook that all these lead singers from the 90s and these pivotal bands that were coming up, Blind Melon is one of them as well.
Yeah.
All passed away.
Good point. Yeah.
Pearl Jam just probably handled it differently. Also, coming from Andrew Wood's OD on heroin and Mother Love Bone breaking up, and Jeff Ament and Stone Gossard putting a band together, let's not forget the original drummer was left because of addiction. Now, was he asked to leave? Did he leave on his own merit? We don't know.
He was
You're never
fired.
going to really, yeah. So they also might have had more of a no tolerance because you don't want to get that close and then lose it. So they experienced this OD very early on.
So they already had their warning. Is what
That's
you're
right.
saying.
They learned.
They had their
Andrew Wood
kind of,
and Eddie Vedder has said it before playing. I think it's Deep. He's where he is because of a heroin overdose. I mean, and that's Andrew Wood. He would not be where he is, and so it probably was like a road they never wanted to go down. I mean,
let me ask a dumb question, maybe for me. Were they known for like being heavy
for hedonism and for like the whole lifestyle? I don't think so.
Like, they did drugs and they drank, but I don't think they were known for like
not like Stone Temple Pilots or
they
Alice
weren't
in Chains.
Yeah, they weren't
like on stage like
flamboyant partiers or
Okay.
They were probably drinking and getting drunk on stage, but
right.
Yeah, the other one, everybody, Scott Weiland, everybody knew about his heroin addiction, like it was out there. Same thing with Lane Staley from Alice in Chains. Everybody, these were kind of known things about these people that they were, functioning addicts, basically.
I don't think
which
Vedder,
I never heard about.
Vedder, I think, was just alcohol and maybe some weed. I don't think he ever did anything stronger than weed. He's a surfer guy. He's for as grungy as he is, the guy loves surfing. He's like, he's two steps away from Keanu Reeves. I mean,
yeah.
Johnny Utah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's start talking about this album now, because we haven't really talked about it. We kind of circled around it, and I think we needed to set the table. I think we kind of needed to kind of get some of this out of the way.
Oh, sure.
To kind of. You can't talk about any of these bands without talking about the other ones. It's part and parcel. It's kind of they are intricately, even if we decide that Pearl Jam is not grunge, they are forever entwined with each other because of
isn't it funny though that a lot of like this kind of thing is always grouped together, right? Even back in the 60s, all the British bands, you just assume that they all knew each other, that they all like to collaborate. You hear all these stories about members of the Beatles playing with members of the Who and the Stones and all, and it's weird to find out that a lot of these, they didn't actually all get along all the time. They were actually rivals. They were, so to hear those kinds of things come out years later. And now the same thing here with the grunge thing too. It's like you find out and the music's different too. Like there are noticeable differences and they don't all sound the same, but it's just so easy to just pigeonhole them and group them together. It's like, well, that's grunge, but there are,
and again, especially since everything came out of one city.
That's right. Yeah.
It didn't make a difference. There was enough other check marks that were checked off that fit, that could say, okay, well, if you're from Seattle, you must be grunge in one form or another. And
like coffee.
Kind of. And love Starbucks.
You all wear flannels and drink coffee.
Well, it has to be marketed somehow.
I just want it to be known that I actually had a flannel shirt on for this, but it got way too effing hot, so I had to take it off. So,
yeah, it's like 50 degrees out in January right now.
Ridiculous. Ridiculous.
I have a heater on down here for me.
You gave it the good old college try, though.
That's right. Yeah.
Got
to look the part, but anyway. So I got my Grateful Dead T-shirt on.
Well, you should be wearing a Neil Young shirt. Is what you should be wearing.
Yeah.
Right.
True that.
Or who?
The Godfather of
Who or Neil Young would have made more sense than Grateful Dead.
That's true.
Way.
I don't have either. So sorry.
Ooh.
You also don't have the grunge hair.
No, certainly not.
Jesus
Wow.
Christ.
The guy was 15 minutes late. He's due something.
I'll take it. That's all right.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year. Okay, so let's get into 10 now, because this is we've kind of circled around it. I think we all agree that it is not grunge, but it skirts it's been thrown into the group of not heavy metal like Ozzy, but in the hard rock. If you're talking about Led Zeppelin, you're talking about metal style music and metal inspired music, right? And it's there. You can hear it. It's there.
Didn't we talk about that with Zeppelin too, right?
Yeah, this doesn't sound like Journey, right? They don't sound like
No.
rock, like that kind of rock and roll, right? Right? Meaning if you're going to talk about influences, like, and what is this, and how does it fit, and where can we place it closely? Yeah, you're going to go with the hard rock, metal-ish. If it's not going to be grunge, right? It's certainly not light rock. Like I said, it's not Journey. It's not Foreigner influenced or Boston or any of that or Genesis. It's got its DNA in Who, and Who was, the Who were one of the forerunners of punk. Yeah, metal, punk, Zeppelin,
alternative,
godfathers of heavy metal. So I think that if Eddie Vedder is saying this self-admittedly, then the DNA is there, that there's some of those metal underpinnings. It doesn't mean that they're full on metal, but you sprinkle some of that in.
Who?
Yeah.
Who?
Who?
The Who.
The Who.
Who?
Yes. What are you, a fucking owl?
Who that?
There's our curse.
There it is.
Yep. Well, that was
that could go on forever. By the way, I mean, we should just
I used to do
blood right there.
I did that to Eric on some of our early episodes. Well, actually, our Who episode. It was ad nauseum. He was starting to get annoyed. He's like, "All right, stop." The joke was old 10 minutes ago, and it wasn't funny then.
I'm just trying to get the Jeff Lynne bell rung somehow. I'm just going to bring it to
I'm sure.
I'm sure Jeff Lynne's responsible for something on 10.
No, he's not. He's maybe for listening to it, or maybe for producing Tom Petty instead.
Well, you just gave him his in, Christy, right there. See, you just did it.
Let's get away. Let's get on this, because it's one of the things, Gerry said he likes to listen to this. He doesn't mind listening to this album in one shot or the way it was arranged, and I think that's an important thing for this album as well. Is the way these tracks are arranged, kind of there is it's kind of gives you some heaviness up front. Actually by the third song you're on mid tempo with Alive, right? But I think the 1-2 punch of Even Flow and Alive, I think, is something that is again, I'm always a big proponent of how the tracks are arranged, and I think those two songs are like matched well together, because Once is kind of this, the album opener, and it's kind of like, okay, here's Pearl Jam. Even Flow kind of settles, you kind of settle in. It's like, okay, here's where the album like really begins. And then you get something like Alive, which is just a total flip side of what Pearl Jam could do. And you get it in two sequential songs. Does that sound, Christy, does that sound like a fair assessment of the beginning of the album?
Yeah, it does. And I'm sure that there was a reason they put the songs in the order they did. However, there's a little mini opera here happening with three of these songs, which is, and it starts with Alive, and then it goes to Once, and then Yellow Ledbetter didn't actually make the 10 album, but it was on the B side of.
I thought it was Footsteps. That was the third.
Yeah, I think it's Footsteps.
I'm sorry,
the Mama Son trilogy.
In the Mama Son trilogy, Footsteps. I apologize. Was on the B side.
That's what I'm here for. Corrections.
Of Jeremy.
I'm like the podcast whiteout.
So it's odd
that a little embarrassing.
It's odd that they opened with.
We'll just edit you out.
With Once, then went to Even Flow and went to Alive, but I'm sure there's a reason for it. What it is, I don't necessarily know. I don't know.
Yeah, when Eddie Vedder wrote those three, that was the thing. Is those were the three songs that Eddie Vedder that were on the audition tape, the instrumentals. Mm-hmm. It was Alive, Once, and Footsteps.
No,
so he had written, like Christy was saying, he had written something called a Mama Son trilogy about this character, because Alive is partially true, but then the part about having sex with his mother is not true.
Not true. Well,
decidedly not true. But then the other songs deal with a murder and then an execution. So this was kind of written as a loose trilogy, but not necessarily to be presented. That was just kind of in his head. Oh, here's this is a 3-song cycle. Doesn't mean we have to present it that way, or that anybody needs to know that. It was just kind of, that's what came out of his initial writing session, was these 3 connected ideas, which were really, which is great, because then you can kind of pick up on it and check it out if you like. But I think Alive is just, it's just you really get to hear. This is the first time you get to hear, outside of Hunger Strike, which his debut, Eddie Vedder's debut, was sharing the lead vocal with Chris Cornell on a project called Temple of the Dog, which was a kind of a tribute to Andy Wood of Mother Love Bone, right? So Eddie Vedder's his debut vocal was on a song called Hunger Strike, and he really kind of made a splash. You really got to hear this guy who no one knew. It's kind of like, Chris Cornell's got this soaring voice on this, but Eddie Vedder matches him on the other end. He's more of a baritone, and he's kind of brings in that lower tone. And in Alive, you kind of get that. You get that Eddie Vedder again. You get that. You get even flow where he's just rolling through the lyrics. You can barely keep up with him. So much so that Adam Sandler did that parody as Opera Man.
It's very easy parodied. It's like
he entered the public consciousness pretty quickly with that. So it was so getting something like Alive right after it really kind of.
But that's
brings the tempo down and gives you another look at Pearl Jam.
That's an absolute testament to the band itself, though, and that's what they brought to the table was this phrasing and the way he punched those words out, and people make jokes about it, but that's their shtick, that's their sound. It's just so great. And Alive is probably my favorite.
I don't even know if you call it shtick. It's just when you watch any of the videos or you see him performing, like back in the day more so than today, there's so much passion.
Yeah,
there's so much.
I don't mean to make light of it. It's just
I mean, the way he holds the microphone, the way he leans in,
he was living it.
His face,
he seems almost uncomfortable.
Yeah, like he almost he's in pain.
He looks away. It's a weird dynamic of how he looks at the crowd, and then you see in the background everyone else is just like going nuts, running around.
Yeah, like he has crazy eyes when he's doing it. His eyes are like,
especially in Jeremy. I watched that video the other day, and I was like, this is kind of disturbing, to be honest.
Sometimes he almost recalls Morrison, I think, too. Yeah. Morrison used to do that with this sort of, leading back and forth and really getting that mic up to his face, and
absolutely.
Yeah, I think he's just in this world by himself when he's just. I mean, he's with the band, but there's like something,
because you're detached from the audience. You know the audience is there, but you're living what you're singing.
Yeah.
That's the reason why I liked him.
I think especially as a younger artist, right? Because it was really, you don't have 20 years in of shows where you can kind of, you don't have to internalize it every time.
Yeah. And you went from surfing.
When you're young, you're playing every show. You're playing it like it's your last show. Like I said, he's hanging from the rafters. He's going across. I mean, concert promoters must have been losing their shit every time because, like, if this guy falls, he's dead.
Yeah.
Like if you guys, the documentary Pearl Jam 20, it's a great document of it's already over 10 years old, but it's a great document of them up to that point, and it goes through all that stuff, all the craziness and all the stuff that they went through to get to where they are, is there. And he was just a wild man, but when he was performing, when he was singing, fully invested. And like I said, on the flip side, when you see footage of Nirvana, it's almost contempt for the audience, and almost anger at the audience, and that we're here, and that's a different vibe. Some people feed off that vibe and want that vitriol spit their way. With Pearl Jam and with Eddie, it was more of that personal, like everybody was kind of getting drawn in because he was so invested in it. Right. And it was genuine. It wasn't an act like a Poison or a Motley Crue where, here's our serious song now. I'm going to cry when I sing it. It was kind of a different, this was something different, and it was kind of leaving that showmanship of the 80s and the hair bands. It was kind of leaving that behind. Eric's mentioned it many times where grunge was kind of a reset of kind of getting back to rock and roll. And when you listen to a song like Alive, it's got electric guitars, it's got acoustic guitars, it's got arrangements to it, which again is also different from that grunge aesthetic where the grunge stuff tends to be just kind of sharper and less produced,
very punkish,
and stripped down. Yeah. This was like full on five person Aerosmith style, where you've got a full band to kind of fill out all these different parts, and when you listen to the new mix, that the Brendan O'Brien mix that came out a couple of years ago, because all of them said they all hated the way this album was mixed. They're like, we absolutely, if we can go back and do it over again, we could. And even Eddie Vedder said, I'll listen to all my albums except for 10, because they just felt it had too much of the reverb and too much of that, like
there's some polish.
Yeah. So so Brendan O'Brien took a crack at it a few years ago, and you go listen, and those are different. Those mix. It's not a remaster. It's a remix, and it was remixed, and it's got more punch, and it's definitely got more bite to it. And it sounds more like a full on rock album, just because there's so many members of the band and so many different instruments that the remix really kind of brings it to the forefront and gives you this full. It's like, wow.
And I probably would argue though also that it's probably because a lot of the songs, you could tell they were some of these original work, mock-ups and demos that they were doing, and they didn't really like Alive. They didn't add much to it. That's the demo. What you hear is what it was. So they didn't add, but then you get to Why Go, and it's like it's almost like this heavy polish. Like there's the reverb, there's that keyboard in there. That's that's sort of almost right from the 80s, like that sort of last gasp of that
yep.
of that sound, like in the early 90s stuff of when the stuff started coming out. It still was there, but it would take a while to start getting warmer and more beefed up.
They would immediately start with their next album. They immediately kind of like just started kind of turning around. And you said Why Go, and then of course Black, which is just like another. It's another home run. It's another home run song. I mean, every track on this album is pretty much a classic, but Black is just another one of. You're getting something from this band that is just all these different looks, and you kind of like, okay, yeah, this is something different. And I think that's what we're getting. That's what you get when you listen to this is, you put it in the grunge box, but then when you listen to it, you're like, nah.
Yeah, that's where this is where it starts to kind of separate. I mean, when you have the way the album starts with that little instrumental, and then the first chords make you think grunge because it's very heavy but then as you get through those first few songs and then you get into this, you see more. This isn't a ballad. This isn't a Home Sweet Home from Motley Crue type of ballad thrown in. This is another like layer of what this band can give you. And I think that's what I kind of was tied into, is that you're not getting the same thing. You're not getting you have your rock song, you have your ballad, all the stuff that the 80s pop bands kind of were doing. And you're not getting just one sound from them. You're getting a lot of different emotions kind of brought through just from how they're presenting it.
Well said. I like the layer. I like the saying that you get another layer to it, which is
absolutely. They tend to start off and the songs just build into this big crescendo. I love any kind of music that does that. Any band that does that starts off. Zeppelin used to do that. Just like just a guitar riff, and then the drums and the bass would kick, and then by the end of it, it's like it's something completely different. And there's a lot of that on this record, and I love the grooves that kick in, and just and that's why to me it reminds me very not necessarily sounds like Led Zeppelin, but it just that
in form.
Those arrangements, and the way they carry through. Yeah.
Gerry, you were going to say something else?
Did you guys have a preference? Like I've listened to the remix, and it's probably more of the emotional attachment to this was back,
the original one.
I like this more, even though I know they don't. Like, do you guys have any? Like, do you care either way, or?
I've never listened to the remix. I haven't, so
I only listened to
the original version.
And
you probably need to give it a few listens to get because it does sound different, right? And Gerry's saying it right there is enough that I like the older sound because it has been redone. They didn't like make it a disco album. They just kind of rearranged some of the, where the guitars come in. Some of the riffs come up a little more forward in the mix, so you can kind of really hear what the guitar work is going on. There's some extra Eddie, there's some extra kind of stuff from Eddie Vedder. Some, there'll be an extra line or extra word or two that's kind of brought up. It's a good listen. If you're interested in the album, like I could listen to either one. I like either one. The newer mix is kind of like, oh, this is kind of listening to it in a different way.
Probably because of maybe our age at the time, I probably side with Gerry on that, where like I do prefer the original. And to what Gerry was saying before is, so Pearl Jam, they have different gears. You're not just staying in one gear the whole time. Like they prove that, you said layering and stuff, but they can, they can, I mean, like look at Release. I mean, that's a completely different.
It's one of the best songs on the album.
It's like
I love that song.
One of my top songs.
And it's so like just haunting and just kind of.
Yes.
Yeah, when he's talking to his father,
it's almost like a Gregorian chant. I mean, it sounds like so many different things.
It just sounds. It almost feels like you're eavesdropping on him in that song. Like it just seems so personal. It's just the way he sings it, his voice. But you take that and you put it side by side with Even Flow, and you're like, okay, whoa, there's gears here. They're not. I mean. So
no, you're absolutely right.
Oceans too. Oceans is I love Oceans because it's so different, and the fact that they're using these like real other types of percussive instruments in it. I think he used a pepper grind and a because they couldn't find I guess he was looking for the sort of the mallet thing, and the nearest like music store was like miles away, and so he just used whatever was in the studio to get a different sound instead of just using drumsticks. So they got that heavy percussive with a fire extinguisher and a pepper grind, so that those do, but it had that sort of more primal effect, and I think that's the closest
like that. That's the closest to a Zeppelin song.
Exactly.
I think, Oceans.
Yeah. Yes. It has those weird guitar riffs in it, like Page would go slightly off, off key,
and the bottom big drums in it. It's there.
Yep.
So you guys are talking about the musical composition, but Oceans is an ode to surfing. The lyrics, anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so.
Yeah.
And speaking of lyrics, that's one of the amazing things about Pearl Jam is that this band was basically formed, and then this outsider guy comes, this lead singer, and basically I don't want to say co-ops the band in a bad way. Immediately become like all the lyrics are written by him. Like he immediately becomes like the guy that is putting all the words to their music, which I thought was very interesting, because usually when there's when people form a band, they want to they don't really give up that control so easily.
Yeah.
In the beginning, I don't. You or Eric may know this. Oh, Gerry, you too. You're kind of smart.
Kind of smart, but he's in the hole.
Didn't I mean later on in the other albums maybe it changed. But in the beginning, wasn't everything like all of their names were written by like. If they wrote the music, they didn't differentiate who wrote the music and who wrote the lyrics. Mm-hmm. It was written by. So you didn't know it was just.
According to Wikipedia, all lyrics are written by Eddie Vedder, and then the music they have credited to if Stone Gossard wrote a song, if Jeff Ament wrote a song,
Well, I know Jeff Ament wrote
together, like so they have it. They do have it broken down on Wikipedia. So that's what I'm.
Well, I mean, if it's Wikipedia,
if it's on Wikipedia, it must be true. I mean, you can't just write anything in Wikipedia.
But I'm going with
you can't just write anything on Wikipedia. Hold on. Shit.
Oh no, it does. It says all lyrics by Eddie Vedder.
Yeah. So he pretty much kind of just swooped in and just kind of like put his, like Pearl, like you, Christy, like you had said, the group was changed forever by the existence of Eddie Vedder and him coming up from San Francisco or San Diego, wherever he was. Mm-hmm. And just having all this, just kind of going in and assimilating with these other guys from Seattle that he was not a part of, not friendly with, did not know, was not part of that scene, right? From the surfing, he was a surfer guy and he was in a couple of bands, but he just comes up there and the collision of him with these guys that were in a very vibrant music scene, right? With Chris Cornell, all these guys were buddies, and they just welcome him with open arms, and he flourishes. Right? He just kind of takes the baton and literally runs with it and becomes like one of the premier lyricists in rock and roll because from here they didn't look back.
For my generation, he's definitely
he's my age, so it's my generation.
Okay, well, yeah, but you weren't cool enough to listen.
Yeah, let's just get that. It's my generation.
So, Christy, right. I have a question.
He's my peer.
I know Eddie Vedder is. I know Eddie Vedder is your hero, right? I mean,
that's Foo Fighters, my hero.
Jesus Christ. Would you say that Eddie Vedder is Pearl Jam, Christy?
Yes.
I'm just judging from what conversations that we've had about.
Well, let me clarify that before she asks. Eric, okay. Are you saying if before you answer, are you saying if Eddie Vedder left Pearl Jam, would they go on without him, or is that what you mean, or how do you mean that?
When you think Pearl Jam, are the contributions of the music aspect of it is as important to you as Vedder? Because you seem to be more keen on the lyrics and the writing and the way he writes, and
it's probably impossible for one to exist without the other. But from my point of view, I don't think Pearl Jam is Pearl Jam without Eddie Vedder.
Mm-hmm.
So
can you listen to Eddie Vedder's solo stuff?
I love Eddie Vedder's solo stuff. So
but it's not the same as Pearl Jam, though.
But it's not the same as Pearl Jam. That's Eddie Vedder. But because I think he is an amazing lyricist, and I can relate to a lot of the things that he writes about, or I can feel for a lot of things he writes about. He speaks to me. But to Eric's point, yeah, I don't think if Eddie Vedder came on the scene, I don't know if someone else could have taken what became Pearl Jam.
Yeah.
Because it was Mookie Blaylock.
Blaylock, yeah.
And I only know who Mookie Blaylock is because of Pearl Jam.
Right,
but
yeah.
I don't know.
Well, people from Eddie Vedder's generation know who Mookie Blaylock already was.
Yeah, nobody liked him.
Wow.
And that ends the 15th round.
It's sad. No friends. I don't think they exist without him. So
yeah, I guess that's what I'm asking.
But I don't think he would have existed without them also, though. I think it's symbiotic in the beginning.
Well,
yeah, that's why I said
Gossard and
it's hard to have one without the other.
Gossard and Ahmed, they came from the other band, and they already had some of these songs worked up.
But I think they would have separated. I think they would have eventually, had Eddie Vedder not come along, Gossard may have gone here. They might have had good careers, but maybe not together.
But playing in other bands, right?
Yes. Yeah. I think they all would have flourished in some way, but Pearl Jam probably would not exist, or whatever the name would have been of that particular band.
Isn't that typical of most bands? I mean, if you like Guns N' Roses, I don't think is the same when, wasn't it only Axl Rose could be Guns N' Roses? It wasn't the same.
Was fucking crazy.
No, you're right. You're right. It becomes just a name.
Yeah. Like, I'm wearing the shirt 5150.
I was going to say Van Halen.
If Eddie Van Halen's gone, that's a huge, even though his son still plays, and it's not the same.
No, it's not. It'll never be Van Halen.
To go back to one of my other favorites, Iron Maiden, when Bruce Dickinson left, they struggled. Like they tried. Even when one of the guitarists left, they tried. And now that they came back, and now they have three guitarists because their songs have to be 20 minutes long. Yep. It's different.
Everybody needs a break. Yeah. That's why there's three guitarists. One they can only play for so long, then the other one has to take over.
Is that because they're your contemporaries, Dean?
No, they're older.
No, they're not as good. They're way older.
Good try though.
But what about Chicago? Chicago went through multiple different singers. But I think what we're talking about is unless I'm misunderstanding Eric, if Eddie Vedder and the remaining members of Mother Love Bone did not meet at the time they met, would Pearl Jam is Eddie Vedder mostly responsible for the success of Pearl Jam?
Would you be listening to whoever Eddie Vedder's band is, or would you be listening?
If the lyrics were the same as they
Gerry makes a good point there too. Yeah.
Yes, I would.
Would it be the same? Okay. So
I would, because for me, it probably, to Eric's point, it probably is more Eddie Vedder than anything for me.
All right.
Okay.
There you go.
There you go.
I live and die Vedder.
Wow.
Well, great. Yeah. See, that's, it's part, a lot of, look at Fleetwood Mac. I mean, what's Fleetwood Mac without Stevie and Lindsay, and they carry the band, but it's Fleetwood Mac. It's John McVie and Mick Fleetwood. It's their band, but they're obviously not the principal songwriters. They're not, but yet they've carried this band through, and they've gone through different iterations, but nowhere near.
I think it's hard to say this now also, because nothing has changed about Pearl Jam.
Yeah,
they've never, outside of once they got Mac Cameron on drums, which I'm gonna say it, but I don't mean it this way, as a lesser member, meaning he wasn't one of the core. Doesn't outwardly affect the band in that way.
Yeah,
I don't mean it. If anything, it's Mac Cameron. If you're listening, I don't mean it that way.
Where's that Greta Thunberg?
But meaning that they didn't have any turmoil and didn't go through any other changes. Kind of like REM. It's always been like REM was always REM.
I was just going to bring them up.
Until Bill Berry retired. He retired.
Yeah.
But there would just like U2. Like, you can't say, oh, would U2 be different now if Bono wasn't in it? You can't say, because Bono has been in it for 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a hard question to ask, because you say, oh, well, Bono is so great now, and he would be great on his own. He might not have been hot shit back then. No, he was just a kid, and might not have known how to even though Eddie Vedder had all these lyrics and stuff. If he's not with the right group of people that can kind of get behind it and enhance it and work with the material, they're just words, right? I'm sure there are plenty of great lyrics that are out there that are sunk by horrible arrangements and horrible music.
Yeah,
that's what I guess.
I think it's symbiotic. I think
that's what I point. That's what
having Pearl Jam behind him allows Eddie Vedder to do his best work, because he knows they're all on board. They're all it is like the Five Musketeers. They are all for each other. So I think that work environment allows him to do his best, and also know that these guys have his back, and that allows him the freedom. Right, he's not constricted, as opposed to if he was in a different band dynamic, with a lead guitarist was like, this is my band, we're going to do it this way, and this is the arrangement. He might be stunted in a different band. It's hard to say.
I said you can't have one. You probably can't have one without the other. You really can't have the four guys without him. It just doesn't exist.
But there was a point of where they weren't, like, I think it was Vitalogy that they were saying that's the album that almost broke them up, because that's when Eddie Vedder was like all about, serving, like really, helping the fans and that
that's
kind
when
of
they
thing.
went to war with Ticketmaster, and
the band was just kind of like, well, can't we just play, whatever?
Yeah.
Let's just make music, and he's just getting all political and stuff. I mean,
I like that album. It might be one of few.
Vitalogy is a great album.
I love that album.
Yeah, no, it's a great album. It's just
I know
again, it was also them getting comfortable with themselves and getting used to that dynamic as well. So, all right, I don't know how much we actually talked about 10. We talked a lot about Pearl Jam. Maybe 10 minutes of this was about 10.
All right. Well, here's another one. Here's another question: is this album the best album? Where does this rank in the?
We lost Gerry. There we go. Well, he'll be back. So, Christy, where does this rank?
It's lights out for Gerry.
No, he's back.
He's back.
He's back.
You shut down my Wi-Fi.
The warden came.
Gerry, you got to.
Somebody got it on the third floor. The lights went out.
Gerry, computers need to be plugged in, Gerry.
It is.
The sisters came knocking. We had to put the lights out.
I must have used up my time allotted with my Wi-Fi.
Okay.
My prisoner time allotted.
So is this their best album?
Yes.
Yeah. Probably.
Yeah.
Really?
Probably.
I mean, a lot of it also
throughout everything they've done and all the changes they've gone through. Do you think this was they didn't get, they weren't better than this album?
Well, I don't I don't like I don't like I don't want to use the word better because Versus is great, Vitalogy is great. I would say their later stuff, I wasn't a huge like in the 2000s and stuff.
Mhm.
Although, what the hell was the name? Backspacer. I
Mm.
was a big fan of Backspacer. Backspacer came at a. There's a lot of songs on there that uh, I came out probably around 2010, and a lot of things happened in 2010. Two major deaths in my life, and there was a lot of songs on there that I
Yeah.
like. I felt like they were back, like to me. And also, and we talked about this on the I think the top five is you grow with them, like the angst that they had in 10 or Versus
Mhm.
start to dissipate as they started to get older, and moods change and stuff. But yeah, I just think that maybe it might be more sentimental to me,
Yeah.
which is why it's my favorite. Not because
Mhm.
they were never better than it. It's just
Mhm.
it's so sentimental. I think is
Vetter
why
was
it's my
never
favorite.
better.
Ding.
I wouldn't say that.
That went right
I
over
think
your head.
Vetter is even to
Well,
this
that's
day is just
but that's
he
the
holds
thing
he
with a
holds his
band
own.
that you stick with. Music tends to
Yeah, you grow
be,
with them.
you grow with them, and
Yeah.
real fans just stick with it, and they deal with all the ups and downs,
All the
the albums
change.
that weren't that great, and and that's,
Yeah.
I don't know, it's always
I'm ride or
was a
die
great thing.
Village people. Still waiting for that comeback album. Still waiting. No?
Yeah, why not?
No? All right.
In the Navy.
Let's shoot around. I don't think this will be earth shattering, but let's go around with two favorite songs each. Jerry, what do you got?
Release.
If you're gonna say to somebody's
Mm.
like, oh, Pearl Jam 10, that's grunge. Well, listen to these two songs and let me know how you feel.
Release is one of my top songs of
Uh-huh.
all time. Like we were saying before, I'm not sure why. Just the way he sings it, the lyrics, all
Mhm.
the instruments behind it, just they kind of transport you in a weird way. Like I'm not sure what emotions I'm sometimes feeling, but
Mhm.
it's just it just kind of gets to me. And then if I picked another, I would probably go with Why Go, because the story it tells of
Yeah.
a poor girl thrown in an asylum, and just to
Mhm.
think of how alone someone could feel. Like you can tell like she's trying to fight this, and at the end she's like, should I just not be different? Should I just give in? And it kind of gives you a different, like it's a maybe I'm just scared to be put in an asylum. I don't know,
Well,
but something really talks to me
hey,
because
that's a
I mean
valid fear.
it brings up the ideas of like the old thoughts of asylum where
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
just took, if you're crazy, you're locked in with all
Yeah,
the
they just threw away
crazy.
the key.
There's no helping,
Kind of
and
like where
just
you are now.
whatever happened, that's what's going on. And
Yeah.
that just kind of that song is always, as much as I love the sound to it, but the lyrics have always kind of screwed with my head.
Huh.
So those would be mine too. Release
Right.
and Why Go.
Cool.
Christy?
You can't pick my two.
Well, it's really
Womp
hard
womp.
because I said before you how much I loved Release, so I feel like
You can like it too. It's all
he
right.
told me I couldn't.
Well, it's not when he has his own show.
Yeah, when you're in your
There you
own
go.
home.
When he does it,
Yeah.
when you get out of solitary confinement, Jerry, then you can speak your mind.
I've been carving on the walls.
I would as
Jerry was
there's-
here.
Again, there's not a bad song on this album.
Yeah.
But
That being
Release,
said, what are you
Release-
going to play for somebody to
Release-
give them a thing?
Release, because like I said before, I think it's a very intimate song. I think it's just the music, the lyrics, the way he sings it. It's deeply personal to him. I don't think he's ever really committed fully the lyrics onto paper. I just looked because I had read that today. Even in here, like Release, it just says Release. Like there's no lyrics written in here.
Mm.
Because I think it's that personal. He talks to his father in it, which is I think, and that might also be why I relate to it so much, because of my father's passing. But and and again in top five, Black. I love. It's such a great love song. It really is. It's just this tortured like love song. It just really it hits me every time I hear it. So those would be the two I would offer this album.
Eric, what you got? Give me all you got.
Give me all you got. Well, you know me, I like weird shit. So the fact that Oceans was a single blows my mind. So if I had to pick like a single or a hit, I'm going to pick Oceans, and then I'm going to pick Porch, just for Jeff Amen's bass in that song. That when that bass kicks in, man, holy shit! That is just. I love the energy. I love just from a purely instrumental aspect to the song. I just love it, and it's just an odd song for Vedder too. The lyrics are a little wild, and he's talking about sitting on a porch, and it's like meanwhile it's like this thing's going on. I just love it, and it's just I love there's always a great deep cut, and this is one of the best deep cuts on this record, I think. So that would be my two. But Alive is, of course, probably,
there's a lot. There's so much to chew on. I would go with probably Jeremy and Black. Only because I think I heard Jeremy first. I think Jeremy was the first exposure. It was something so different. I'm like, what? Like, this is just so. The lyrical content was something so different. The sound was so different. And like Christy said, Black is just this haunting song. I'm going to throw in a third because the host. What? What is this, Little Rascals? Hey.
Oh my goodness!
Don't eat the porridge. Why? It's spoiled.
It's spoiled.
I'm throwing in. It was recorded at the same time, but never released at the same time. It was the flip side to a CD single that I had, which is Yellow Ledbetter, which is one of their best songs that they ever did. An incredible song. Again,
my ringtone.
Hard to understand the lyrics, but once you read the lyrics and you understand what it's about, it's a powerful song. Eddie Vedder changes the lyrics from time to time to reflect whatever war the United States happens to be in at the time. But that song on its own, I remember I bought the CD single for Jeremy because it was in Tower or one of those things, and I heard this song Yellow Ledbetter, and I'm like that to me illustrates the versatility of Pearl Jam, is that they can do something like that type of a song. That is just.
I think Footsteps falls to that as well. I kind of put Footsteps and Yellow Ledbetter together in that regard.
It's just a song that just kind of. It sounds like a band that like Yellow Ledbetter sounds like a band that was already around for 10 years. Like it just sounds that cohesive and just that like. It just sounds like a pro band. You can't play that. You can't play that.
Come on.
Sorry. You want to get us copyright struck?
Everyone knows. Yes.
If we could play music, don't you think I'd be playing music on every episode?
It's from my phone.
Wow.
My phone rang.
Wow. It's just flouting the rules. Doesn't care if the government's going to drop the hammer on my head.
Wow, that got
so
intense
dramatic.
right there.
Me and Gerry are just kind of like, okay, man.
So dramatic.
I feel very uncomfortable right now.
I think that's going to do it. I mean, I think we've kind of made the case that this is, while it will always forever be labeled a grunge album, it's something more than that. I think it transcends that. It definitely it doesn't transcend all labels. It's not like this thing. It transcends that label though, because it is definitely guilt by association is what we can call it. They were in with those groups. They all got pulled over at the same time. The cops said, "You guys are all grunge." And Pearl Jam happened to be in the same car with those other bands. I think that's really what it is.
But they established something.
Yeah,
something
and they exactly, and they showed exactly with their longevity. They showed that that's not what they are. They showed that they are a classic rock band in all of whatever that means.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right. Whatever that means. That's what Pearl Jam, through their longevity, through their stability, right, through their lack of or lack of drama and controversy in a bad way. I don't mean the Ticketmaster thing, but in these other things. And then again, with their activism and with their social consciousness of Eddie Vedder and just wanting to make things better, that kind of puts you into that pantheon and it kind of elevates you as well with your peers. And they have definitely achieved that in their long career. And they're still there, still putting out albums and still selling out. Try and get a Pearl Jam ticket. Good luck. Where's Ticketmaster now when you need them?
Right.
I wish they didn't sell the tickets the way they did because they're freaking expensive right now.
Yeah.
But I wish they were still a little angry with.
But yeah, this is one for the ages. 91 was an interesting and pivotal year in music. But now you've got Nirvana to check out, and then put this one on and tell me that they're not diametrically opposite to each other, but they were in quote unquote the same genre. So let us know how you feel about that. You can hit us up on social media at 3324 Podcast. That'll work on Instagram and the old Facebook if you go on there. We're there lurking and hanging out. If you're watching us on YouTube and you've made it this long, well, guess what? You beat the algorithm because it's usually 10 minutes and you're out. So go ahead and hit the subscribe button if you would and like it and leave a comment. That would be awesome as well. And that's going to do it for this episode. So for Gerry, who's getting out of solitary very soon, for Christy and for Eric, this is Dean asking you to please be kind and rewind. No, that's what we say in our movie ones. We say we'll see you on the flip side for our music ones.
That's right.
Later.
You've been listening to the 3324 podcast with Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber. You can find us on your favorite podcast provider, so please like, subscribe, and rate to become a part of the 3324 family. Your feedback is important, so make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at 3324 Podcast and on Twitter at 3324P to join the conversation.